人類2.0、超越人類主義，都係指藉住更先進嘅科技，提升人類嘅思想、學術、心理同埋生理等各種機能。原因，科學家相信人類嘅機能有住眾多嘅限制，但係藉住不斷發展嘅嶄新科技，能夠將人類現有嘅限制打破。美國軍部相信人類2.0將會係另一次嘅軍事競賽，就好似美國同埋蘇聯敵對時期，雙方亦都進行咗軍備競賽，不斷製造核彈。但呢一次，佢哋將會不斷製造出更先進嘅人類。當提升至國防層面嘅時候，呢場競賽將會停不了，並且將會改變所有人類嘅思想同埋身體。並且科學家所提出嘅理由甚為吸引，亦會讓人類難以抗拒。
So I'm Steve Fuller. I'm a professor of sociology at the University of Warwick. I hold a chair in social epistemology, which is a field that I'm closely associated with, which has to do with the social foundations of knowledge, understood from both an empirical and a normative perspective. That is to say, not only how knowledge has been and is being produced, but how it should be produced in the future. And in terms of my interest in this topic, in terms of Humanity 2.0 and transhumanism, I should say that my original background is in history and philosophy of science. And there has been this general tendency to understand science as kind of the vanguard social practice, as it were, for defining what humanity is. So in a sense, science projects our possible futures in many respects, and this is especially true with regard to issues of technology. And about 5 or 6 years ago now, I got involved in the European Union Framework Project on converging technologies. And this is the idea of nano, bio, info, and cogno sciences and technologies, possibly working more closely together, in that sense converging, to provide a sort of transformed, indeed an enhanced notion of the human condition, what might be called Humanity 2.0. And it was at that point, being involved in this project, which is designed to influence science policymaking across the European continent, that I started thinking more widely about the philosophical implications of this kind of world that's being actively promoted by science policymakers, and indeed not just in Europe, but also in the United States. There's also a similar initiative there. And this is what I mean by Humanity 2.0, and it's a broadly transhumanist agenda. And by transhumanist, what I mean is taking the kinds of qualities that we regard as most distinctive of human beings, what separate us out the most from animals, whether we're talking about consciousness or rationality, or any other sorts of, for the most part, though not entirely, mental powers, and amplifying them in some way, and in this sense, enhancement. So to the possibility that we may in fact even be able to turn into or evolve into another species that is a kind of amplified or better version of what we are now. And this might be through biological, or through some biotechnological, or perhaps through a kind of technological self-transformation, sort of uploading, as it were, into a more silicon, durable form. All of this I include in the concept of transhumanism, and it's largely what I study and have been very interested in pursuing as Humanity 2.0.
But as thinking human beings, we care about far more than that. Consciousness means that we have the capacity to experience the world, to reflect upon, and, most importantly, to shape it. And so, what begins as humanism, our most sympathetic understanding and treatment of human nature, becomes transhumanism, the drive to fundamentally revolutionize what it means to be human by way of technological advancements. Changing human nature might be the most dangerous idea in all of human history, or perhaps the most liberating. Generally speaking, transhumanist thought does two things. First, it considers current trends to see how future technologies will develop and how they might affect us. Second, it calls for the use of current and upcoming technology to bring about beneficial societal change. We'll examine three central areas of transhumanist thought: superlongevity, superintelligence, and super well-being. Aubrey de Grey, an expert in research on aging, argues that our priorities are fundamentally skewed and that we must start thinking seriously about preventing the huge number of deaths due to aging, the greatest cause of fatal diseases in the Western world. The goal of this strand of transhumanism is superlongevity. If modern medicine is supposed to keep us alive and healthy for as long as possible, then the anti-aging movement takes medicine to its logical conclusion. It's what happens when as long as possible means as long as we want. Let's move on to the next area of transhumanist thinking. Every year, computers are getting more powerful. What used to fill up a room now fits in our pockets. More crucially, the time it takes for computer power to double is also getting shorter. At the outset of computing, the doubling process took 18 months, and this interval appears to be getting smaller. Plot this on a graph, and it's not a straight line, but an exponential upward curve. We need only project into the future to see that there is a point at which this line is practically vertical, a moment in human history referred to as the technological singularity. The futurist thinker Ray Kurzweil postulates that as these technologies develop, we will likely edit our bodies in order to integrate with computers more and more. This concept should be familiar. We're already in a symbiotic relationship with technology. You can send your thoughts at incredible speeds to recipients on the other side of the planet, find your precise location using satellites, and access the world's repository of recorded human knowledge with the device you carry with you at all times. And all of this was unthinkable 20 years ago. Out of this predicted computer capability explosion may eventually come artificial intelligence, a simulated consciousness in silicon. Given the rate at which an AI will be able to improve itself, it will quickly become capable of thought with precision, speed, and intelligence presently inconceivable to the human mind. If Kurzweil is right and we end up integrating ourselves with technology, we could be in private contact with this AI whenever we choose. The result of this is that we effectively merge with this AI and its abilities become our own. This would propel the human race into a period of super-intelligence. Let's look at the last section, which deals with the issue of well-being. Imagine you're soon to be a parent. Your doctor informs you that, if you wanted, you could choose certain features of your child's biology. You could choose how genetically prone to depression they will be, their levels of anxiety, jealousy, anger, and even their pain threshold. Would you choose a high likelihood of chronic depression, an intolerably low pain threshold? How about panic attacks and anxiety? Probably not. The last major branch of transhumanism, spearheaded by philosopher David Pearce, aims to investigate and phase out suffering. He argues that, ultimately, all our conscious states, our feelings, moods, and emotions are all an expression of our brain chemistry. For Pearce, it is clear that natural selection hasn't designed us to be happy, it's designed us to be good at surviving and passing on genes. A species that is permanently anxious and discontented will have a higher motivation to watch out for predators and take precautions for survival. But in today's world, these emotions are vicious. Our biology has barely changed in 200,000 years, which means that whilst culture and society has arguably made progress, we are still those same aggressive, jealous, anxious, savannah-dwelling hunter-gatherers. This is why Pearce argues that if we ever hope to increase the well-being of our species, we will have to edit our genes. Minimizing our suffering, and the suffering of those we care about, is a crucial part of what drives us. Hence, so-called abolitionists argue that we start using modern technologies to do exactly that, minimize and eventually abolish suffering, ushering in an era of so-called super well-being. At present, every child is a roll of the genetic dice. Pearce argues that the least we can do is load the dice in our favour to create happier, healthier, longer-living humans.